program is yet to be discussed and or designed, but we did want to give some examples, not just to the council, but also to the public as to what the thought process is behind this. So the big question is, in taking a look at this information, A, do you have any comments on the way it's presented? And B, do you think we have enough that council could move forward with scheduling I believe it was open house, community open house? So the first hand that I see raised is Councilor Dumont.
Thank you. I still am very interested to find out why some are not developing there. Is it parking or is it height? Because this isn't going to solve the problem if parking is the main issue. I would also like to see the in the 10-foot category, that there's certain things that have to be done and then you can pick from others. And then in the 20, everything in the 10 plus additional things for the 20, which gets into the footage. I had a call today and it was pointed out that the first floor needs to be around 13 feet just for like the nice stuff of that. And then each additional floor would be 11 feet. And if we're, so if we are aiming for 5 stories, but we're 2 feet short. We're calculated for 10, I believe. We're 2 or 3 feet short at 55. So that was one comment. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's if you assume 13 feet for lobby areas of buildings. Depending on what's being built, it may not necessarily be 13 feet. Clearly, that is a consideration as well, though. You could have some people that say, I want my first floor to be 15 feet. So the height would have to be used accordingly to the developer. They may find that the front half of the building is 13-foot lobby and a total of 4 stories. The back half of the building is something completely different. But again, that's for council to discuss. If you think that the 55 is a good number, bad number, that's your opportunity to get around as to what you want to float to the public. I would also throw out there that the mandatory versus the optional criteria, it was not viewed that the mandatory would get you 10 and the optional would get you to the 20. This was just an idea of what could be used for whatever gradations you wanted to give out. You could put it in there that if you only do the mandatory, you get the 10 feet. And if you pick a certain number of optionals, you get to 20. You could put in there that the mandatory criteria is required to get to 20 and leave it at that. It really is whatever program you feel would be appropriate in terms of how to mete out those additional height footages. We did also listen to what you said about the parking, which is why if you take a look at the second bullet under the mandatory criteria, structured parking would need to be part of the project. And it could either be on site through a partnership with a third party or through a development agreement with the city. So to give you an example, if a developer wanted to do work on a block and the city had property across the street, they could certainly propose to enter into a development agreement with us, whereby structured parking would be constructed on the city's property in order to benefit the private property across the street, provided there was still public parking figured into whatever was developed on the city site. So we did want to make sure that that was viewed as a mandatory option or a mandatory criteria. If someone wanted to do above 35 feet, they've got to factor structured parking into what they're doing, either on-site or off-site, and either with or without the city's participation.
And I just, in my opinion, I think one of the mandates for the additional 20 feet should be workforce housing. Somewhere in there includes some workforce housing because we're really in need of that. There's no better place because a lot of the workforce housing that we need, they work in that area.
Okay. Councilor Jansen.
Yeah, so I just wanted to back up with what Councilmember Dumont said, that originally I had suggested 30 feet instead of 20, just for that buffer zone, so that if you had a 16-foot first floor, and also take into consideration that hazard zone that comes up to First Street, that we have that little extra space for, electrical conduit chases, duct working, things like that. And also when it came to the rooftop dining, if a developer or contractor put up some kind of tarp or covering for inclement weather, that what the consideration that was. So I still feel that the 30 feet or maybe somewhere in between, and I'd compromise maybe that 25 feet, so that we can make sure that incentive is there for them to do what they want to do here in downtown Jax Beach. And to your point, Georgette, I think that it's a combination of height and parking. I think it's both. And we need to address it. And I'm glad to see that bullet point was put in there, Mike.
Councilor Golding.
Well, to Ms. Dumont's point, it seems to me that we're making assumptions here, and we don't have data. We're saying, oh, we think it's height, or we think it's parking, or we think it's both. So my concern is, do we go and start changing things without having a good grasp on what really is needed to address what needs to happen in the downtown area? I mean, you could make an argument. You look at Neptune Beach and Atlantic Beach Town Center, their height limit is 35 feet there, and they have parking issues, but yet they're doing well, and they have been for many years. So, I tend to agree with Ms. Dumont that I have some concerns about, are we just taking a stab in the dark, or are we going to be making changes based off of having some data?
Councilor Meza.
Yes, I think it's a combination of both parking and height. The little empty lot in between Lynch's V's Pizza, that little empty lot, you really couldn't build on it. You needed parking, you needed a lot of things. And unfortunately, Neptune Beach and Atlantic Beach, their design works for them, and we don't have that same design we have here. We have a mixed use of a lot of things. That's just my personal opinion, and I've given it a lot of thought about why is Neptune Beach and Atlantic Beach have so many successful businesses, and why is it that people are still going? And I think has a lot of it to do too in the design of how everything is in that corridor. For us here in the Central Business District, we have a high-rise condominium with corporate offices on the first floor now. Next to it, we have a rundown building that they're actually probably going to tear it down within the next year, and they want to develop it into something nice where families can come in and eat food and have a good time with a rooftop bar. We have a hotel next to a building that has 3 venues, corporate offices on the second floor, and then we have a souvenir shop. So our design here is really not conducive to what Neptune Beach and Atlantic Beach are doing. And that's just my opinion. And I think on the height and the parking is a big issue, because I've talked to people in the real estate development that have complained about, well, we can't even build anything because we don't have enough parking. So we can't even go above the 36, 37 feet if we wanted to do a first floor parking. So I think there's a lot of issues of what's holding this area down, and parking and the height limit. That's it. Thank you.
Councilor Nichols.
And just to feed off that, I mean, I think Atlantic and Neptune Beach is a very different situation than we are. They have a lot of residential very close by. It's a smaller area. It's a very pleasant walking. You can walk the whole area in less than 10 minutes. People have put in investments in there, and then the housing and stuff that's north of there, that's the place to go. We're kind of stuck in the middle. Our residents are mostly across 3rd Street. So bringing people, we have to be able to bring more people here from our community and put something that's going to be more attractive to outdo that. But the corner is successful because everybody in Atlantic Beach is the closest thing to their house. So that's just my opinion. But I do think that parking, obviously, I mean, we have a lot of surface level parking, which is horrible. It's like a desert. People don't like seeing that. People like to see small, locally owned shops. We need to be able to incentivize those, and we need to be able to get rid of the vacant areas in order to make this an attractive place for people to go with more to do. But just having to walk a whole block across a parking garage just is not a pleasant thing for people to do, and they typically avoid it.
Councilor Stokes.
Well, I think we've got a good second step now. So I appreciate staff's work in putting this together. I think there's a lot of stuff that we can build on. My suggestion is that I think that we should put this out to our local organizations such as NEFPA and NEFAR and get some feedback from them. To Councilor Dumont's point, that's a great source of business leaders who are builders and contractors, the real estate agents who know that, okay, what is this property? If you could put, we need people living down there. What is this? What is the value going to be on these residences? What is the sustainability of workforce housing? And those are professionals in that field who I think would gladly give their time to review some of these things and help see Jack's Beach go in a positive direction. And they would I feel like they would be a very good answer to the height and parking question. I think both of those organizations would be more than willing to give us some constructive ideas to help this program, because I think we've got a really good spot and get it buttoned up before we take it to the community.
Which I guess brings full circle to the council direction that was being requested. Are we at a point where council feels comfortable having an open house with the public? Or do you feel that there needs to be more changes or more conversation before we actually get the pulse of the community?
I think when you say get the pulse of the community, you're talking about the open house, not the survey. Because I think we need the survey data before we have the open house. So this way, if it is parking and height or a combination, we have data to show residents the pros and cons.
Does anybody else feel we need to do survey information first? Councilor Nichols.
I don't. I think we need to get this going as quickly as possible. I think the survey will get a feel from the community. I think we invite the business owners and the property owners in the downtown business district and open it up to the public and get them and let's talk it out there. And then if we determine that we need a survey after that, we can do that. But we need to get this thing moving. I don't want to wait 6 months on a survey. And, I just think it's time to get the community together and at least have the conversation and put out some ideas and see what people say. But I think the property owners and the business owners in the downtown business district, they're ready to tell us, because every time, I get asked all the time. So they're ready to put in their inputs and let's move forward as quickly as possible.
Any other feedback? Mayor, I know that you were dubbed as the one to host said open house if and when we're ready to do it. Your thoughts?
I mean, I think that the survey is happening one way or the other. So I don't see why we can't schedule a workshop and open house concurrently while we're waiting on that survey data. Because I think once we start to have this conversation publicly in the form of the open house, I think we're going to get feedback in addition to through a formal survey process. So I'm fine to go ahead and get that scheduled and work on both things concurrently.
Councilor Jansen.
So realistically, how long does it take to formulate and tabulate a survey and to do it right, roughly?
Good question. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, so I agree with the mayor. I don't know that if we can do them concurrently, that would be great. I wouldn't want to wait an undetermined amount of time, because then we're talking about the completion of the charter and getting it on the ballot and what have you. So no unnecessary delays on my part.
Yeah, I think for the benefit of all council, when you talk about a survey, if we're talking about surveying the local property owners and the local business owners, we can certainly do that. Once you start talking about speculative development or developers from not just our metro area, but beyond our metro area, the question becomes, who do you reach out to? If you start talking about workforce housing projects, there are a bunch of different developers that are located in South Florida that specialize in that. But we wouldn't know to go knock on their door unless there was a desire for workforce housing projects in the downtown, and we wanted to see what their parameters would be for doing such development. The same thing goes with national firms, brands, franchises, etc. So I think gauging the interest of local property owners and local business owners is one thing, and maybe getting some feedback from Chet. I think you referenced NEFA and NEFAR. We could probably get some feedback from them, but in terms of actual developers, if someone from Atlanta comes to the table, I don't know that we would know to survey developers out of Atlanta to ask them what they would look for to come into our market. So I just want to make sure that there's an expectation with regards to what we actually do for survey. It's going to be more at the local level / Jacksonville metro area, but not necessarily going beyond those confines. Is that something that?
And Mike, I think I was up next.
Your hands up
But
first.
Mike,
Yeah.
my concern is the last survey that was done in the downtown business district was a complete disaster. I know you weren't here. Incredibly biased. They invited people. They took them on a tour of downtown, kind of gave them the city's perspective of what that group wanted, and then go here, fill out the survey. I mean, we need to find an unbiased way to be able to survey these people without pushing an agenda to really figure out what they have, because that survey was completely worthless. I mean, there was like, I don't know, 50 people or 100 people that took it, and half didn't live in Jacksonville Beach. And so, we took direction from a unscientific and very biased survey. And I just want to make absolute sure that we don't get caught up in that.
Understandable. Councilor Stokes?
Yeah, and the reason why I suggested those two organizations is because they're local, and I think the feedback would be quick. And also, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I know Councilor Nichols posed it earlier. I think this should have a local focused approach and definitely prioritize the Northeast Florida area people, just because they know the region better, they're invested in the region, they're here. I'm just not so about open this up to South Florida and Atlanta and Councilor Nichols talked about small businesses, local businesses. I think that's what we want to prioritize. And, I think NEFAR and NEFBA will give us that focus and keep it local instead of going to outside of our city.
And I'm pretty sure y'all saw that one property, Dolphin Depot, sold this week for like 400 or 500 times what the purchase price was in 2014 or 2015. So there is definite demand to get something done here. And there's people willing to invest in our community, and I don't want to waste this opportunity.
Councilor Golding.
In talking about surveying people, I believe it was Art Graham, the chairman of the CRA, had spoken to Al, the guy who owns Al's Pizza Coop and Flying Iguana, because Al used to live in the Metropolitan, and he asked him, why aren't you developing in downtown Jax Beach? Why are you doing everything in Neptune Beach? And Al told him that he lived in that area and he got to see what it was like down there, and he didn't feel that it was a safe place to put a business, so he wasn't going to invest in downtown Jax Beach. Now, that's just one opinion, but that kind of input is important. So, I mean, we need people like that people who have done things in Neptune Beach to be a part of the survey too, get their feedback as well.
I see, the beaches, our island as the initial place to reach out. I've spoken to Al numerous times about that situation, and a lot of it had to do with previous administration and the good old boy hurdles that had to be jumped, and the transition. He was here. It was a long time ago when he was here, and things have changed. And then he also told me that his wife wants him to slow down and spend more time with her too. But he's a great guy, and I think if he saw what we were doing and inviting people like that to say, hey, what would it take, is not a bad idea.
Councilor Jansen.
Yeah, so, and there's a prime piece of property, sizable, in our downtown district that's poised to be developed pretty soon, if everything goes right. Where Joe's Crab Shack is, basically, there's property around that. I think, to Councilor Nichols' point, is here's the opportunity. It's time for us to get to work. We can't drop the ball like it has been dropped in the past. So I'm ready to move forward with it. And and if we need to go talk to developers, I don't have a problem doing that. And let's get their input and see what they say as far as what they need from a contractor's point of view. Do they need 16-foot first floors? Do they need, how much room do they need for electrical conduits and chases and ducts and things like that? And what do they need for a rooftop restaurant? But to your point, Mike, I like where we're going with what you have put into this proposal. And I personally am ready to go forward with the open house, or whatever we're going to call it.
So I think I'm hearing a consensus to, at the same time, proceed with doing the survey and start the scheduling process for the community open house, using the information that's here as a starting point for the conversation with the public, and hear what they have to say. Councilor Nichols?
I think we would get pretty good quality feedback in the open house, that we could develop a survey from that. And from those information to get more detail, I would say we try to do it immediately after. I think concurrently, we might feel like we missed some of the questions that we needed to ask in the survey if we just do them concurrently.
Yeah, and when I use the term concurrently, my apologies. I don't mean that they would both be occurring at exactly the same time. I fully think putting the survey together will take longer than it will be to schedule a public open house. The public open house we can probably have on the calendar within a couple of weeks. Putting together the right survey and figuring the right places to send it is going to take a little bit more time. Mayor Hoffman.
Weren't Heather and Taylor putting a survey together already, and we were just going to tack on to that they were sending to downtown business and property owners with regards to incentives? I thought there was already a survey in development.
We've got Heather on the line. Let's see if she's actually listening to that question, and she is.
I am, if I can unmute myself. Yes, ma'am, we actually have that survey ready to go, but it was very specific to the incentives toolbox and what incentives that businesses would be interested in. So at the very end of that survey, we did add a question. It was open-ended, what roadblocks do you think there are to development downtown? But it could be, jumping off point. Obviously, it'll take us some time to get those results. We have no idea how many we'll get back, but I think we have about 1,000 plus property owners we're going to send that out to in our mailing list. Some are business owners, some are property owners that their mailing address is, in out of state, and a lot of condo owners. So, obviously when we get those results back, we'll share it, but it was specific to the incentives programs for the CRA.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So not to misuse the word concurrently, but it sounds like we will be working both of these things in parallel and starting that process. Any other comments or questions? I presume from here forward, since you all nominated the mayor to be the spokesman, she and I will work out the details of how that open house will basically flow. I see a couple heads nodding, thumbs up. Okay, sounds good. All right, it's at this point of the meeting, I'm going to turn it over to the Dennis Barron Show. Dennis, you've got the next 3 items, starting with your dune protection update and direction request. So I'll let you take the floor.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I appreciate the opportunity to take on the rest of the topics that we have for this evening. The first briefing topic we had was the dune protection update and direction. So we've presented this at 2 separate briefings so far, talking about Mr. Brown's idea of using the PVC piping and the ropes and the signage to help protect our dunes moving forward. So the update that I really have for you at this point in time is that Public Works has had 0 issues with maintenance or upkeep. Mr. Brown and his crew have been keeping up with any issues and problems. We had 1 small issue, and that was our own issue where the piping was in our way for digging out an outfall that was not normally dug out, which we were able to accommodate. It wasn't anything to have to do with the protection. It was the fact that the ropes were in the way for us to dig it out. We moved those and made accommodations for being able to dig that. So I was looking for some further direction as far as from the council. Did we want to continue this project? Did this project need to expand its boundaries? Is it in agreement amongst of y'all of whether or not we purchase additional materials? We have a pretty good size still stockpile of materials in Public Works, so we have that available to expand that if that's the direction you so choose. The idea was basically just get the idea whether we wanted to continue to cover this for the entire beachfront from Seagate all the way down to the St. Johns County line, or whether we wanted to just to continue to expand this project incrementally, or what you wanted us to be able to do moving forward. I have talked with Mr. Brown. He has got plenty of volunteers, of course, because the school year started, so he's ready to expand if that's the direction you wanted to provide.
The first hand up is Councilor Dumont.
Thank you. When I looked at what some of the options were, I kept thinking about what was our main goal, why we started doing this to begin with, and it's to maintain and protect the dunes. So there's the question about whether this should be done in front of condos. If the the goal is to protect the dunes, I would say, yeah, it should be, because it is still done on public land, even though it's in front of private property, and the private property in a lot of those condos, they rent out or they do vacation rentals for the units, and that will impact the dunes, and we don't want to have the negative impact of the dunes, whether it's in front of a private property or a public property. So I'd be fine with that. And the maintenance, you've noted that you're not having any issues with that. So I think it's been a very nice collaboration. And so I would say we should expand it now all the way down to St. Johns County. I think you'll have some heartache in some areas in the south part, depending on how you do it, because they're like Chet's walkover is 33rd, and there's no walkover there. It's just a trail through the dunes. So it really will depend on how you try and accommodate those trails through the dunes, because even though there's no walkover, there is a public access point between Ocean Drive and up to the back end of the dune before you walk through the dunes.
Correct. The only thing I could think of is that we would have him go ahead and mark the trail through the dunes to keep people on the same trail and not just wandering wherever. The other thing to keep in mind is we're about to begin construction on 8 walkovers, which is going to close 8 walkovers at various stages between demolition and construction as well. So it's going to actually increase traffic on a lot of the other walkovers potentially based on those closings as well.
Councilor Golding.
So I did talk to Mr. Brown as well, and I would say, to Ms. Dumont's point, the further south we go in Jack's Beach, the less public parking there is down there. So I would say that if we do any expansion, that we should definitely make sure that we're doing it in areas where we have, public access. And I believe we still have a lot of areas that we have public access and we don't have the pipes and the rope. Because I think that's the biggest issue that we're seeing is the residents know, I think, in general, to stay off the dunes. It's the visitors that are really the biggest concern, because they may not understand that they're supposed to stay off the dunes. Kevin does say that he's got all the volunteer help that he needs, and he can cover whatever needs to be done. I will add that he said that they do intend to plant more sea oats, and they're planning to do some like infill with sea oats. And his comment was that he would want to do the pipe and the rope at the same time that they're doing sea oats, because he wants to make sure any of the new sea oats they put in are going to be protected. So I would say my vote would be that we definitely consider expanding it, with a focus being on those areas where we have more public access. As far as some of the other questions, Kevin said they are ready to do whatever we need to do, and he's been happy to follow up on any issues that have come up. There have been a few places where some pipe has been removed or taken down, and he said people will call him and tell him, and he'll go down there and he'll fix it. So, or he gets kids to help him with some of the repair that needs to be done. So I agree, it's a good collaboration, and I think we've seen good results from it. So I would definitely support expanding it.
Councilor Stokes.
I just want to kind of second on what Councilor Dumont was saying. I think there's definitely some need for something on down, on the extreme south end. but between 25th and being 37th, actually really between 25th, 37th is your last major public walkover on the south end. And then it's mostly residential past 25th. In fact, it's all residential past 25th. So I think in there, I worry about limiting the homeowner access as well, because they do have that right to access the beach, and we do want the dune protection as well. So I think I would really push for some really good signage down on our end. I think that would be best. And you would be surprised how much traffic we get. I mean, I'm on the corner of 33rd and 2nd, and I have people parking in front of my house every weekend in the summer, and I'm 2 blocks away. It's people up and down the street, and they're not Jack's Beach people. I see them walk into the beach. They are coming, carts, buggies, chairs. They're here for the day. So we do have a lot of people, even though we don't have public parking, we do have a lot of people. And so I think some really good signage, but we are mostly, the residents aren't, they're not crawling over the dunes for fun. But I do think that we need some really good signage, if not PVC all the way up and down between 25th and St. Johns County. And then, really between 37th and St. Johns County, I think you could go without and just put some good signage on the beach access points that just, we don't have any signage really on 33rd and on the streets up and down. And so I think that would just go a long way above PVC down where it's heavily residential. And not as many apartments or condos or rentals. Although we do get a lot of vacationers. So just, I make that point because I do see it. And if you're here anytime in the summer, between 37th and 25th, all these streets are chock full of people parking on the right of way headed to that beach access.
Mayor Hoffman.
If this is not costing us very much in money or labor, and it's been effective where it's been in place so far, then I do support expanding it with the priority to the more heavily trafficked and higher volume of parking areas. But I also my main comment was on Sandy's point is in terms of the new sea oats being planted. I think that we should allow them to go ahead and put PVC pipe and rope up anytime that they're doing a planting, regardless of where it is, and not just so that people know to stay off of it, but maybe to attach a sign that says something, to the effect of just pointing out that it's a dune restoration program by, whatever Kevin Brown's, the marine science kids or whatever it is. But so there's some information attached to what's being done there. And then also the protection of adding the PVC pipes while the sea oats get ingrained in their new habitat.
Dennis, I'm not seeing any more hands. Do you feel you have clear direction?
I do. I do not have a problem. I'm sure Mr. Brown is watching, and I'm sure he's excited to get started.
Awesome. Okay, with that, you can roll on into your next item, Senate Bill 64.
All right, my second topic for the evening is just simply an update for everyone on the council on the Senate Bill 64. Basically, what I provided to you as far as the briefing goes is what we're planning on sending as supporting documentation with our application back to DEP. You can see I highlighted maybe 10 different options. Not for sure any of those or which direction they would be taken or how well they'll be received. However, I think that it was at least to get it on your radar to have the understanding is that this is a very large requirement for us to have to live by as far as the regulatory end of it. And we believe, we'll probably have things to be coming forward after we get our filing and we get back some information back from DEP to be engaging one of our engineering firms to be able to help us further this along and determine what is the best option or what are the costs for all of our options. Every cost I gave you on here was simply no more than a departmental guess. Do not hold us to any of those costs. Those costs could go twice as much as what they are listed on the paper. I've already heard of some deep injection wells that they were estimated at 10 that are now coming in at in excess of 20. So some of these things are all over the place, and demand is going to increase after the November filing time to be able to get this in front of DEP. So at this time, I'd entertain any questions if anybody has any on that. It was just simply to update what we're about to send to DEP in response.
Mayor Hoffman, I see your hand raised, but I don't know if that's a carryover.
Sorry.
Does anyone have any questions for Dennis on this particular item? Again, it was just to bring you up to speed on what he's filling in the application with. Council.
Dennis, do you think there's any way they're going to rescind this or come up with a way that's to spread it out a little bit more over time? Because I mean, this is going to be, very challenging financially for cities. I mean, we're lucky to be in a good financial situation, but most cities in Florida are not.
Let me chime in before Dennis gives a response, but the original proposed legislation over the past 2 years called for implementation by 2026.
Okay.
So the fact that we knew that this was a direction the governor and most of the legislature wanted to go, Florida League of Cities behind the scenes did some heavy lobbying to get an extra 5 years tacked onto that, because I believe we now have approximately a 10-year window to implement versus the initial 5. And enough jurisdictions knocked on legislators' doors and said, hey, it takes years to do the right feasibility studies and then start your design process. 5 years is way too short. So I think we're happy that we got to the 10, but it still doesn't make us happy with regards to what we might have to spend financially. Dennis, is there anything you want to add based on the permitting course you went to or your conversations?
Yes, and part of that is I think everybody is viewing that this legislation could be changed or altered any time in the next upcoming timeframe before it actually has to be implemented. With that being said, like I said, we don't want to be behind the ball and be dragging our feet and drag it out to 2030, and then all of a sudden we're scrambling trying to figure out how to meet the goals and they haven't been done. But I would expect over the next year or so, a year or two, you're probably going to see some jockeying and some alterations to maybe some of these requirements. We still have some questions that are floating out there. There's a lot of questions. Obviously, we're have to design this around our current average daily flows, but our average daily flows accommodate for us to be able to send a certain amount to reuse and irrigation. Well, when our flows are extremely high, that's also the time we don't need reuse and irrigation because it's been raining a whole bunch. So therefore, we're going to have excessive amounts of flows, and nobody's really answered the question of how do you accommodate what happens when you have extra flow, because everything here is aimed on meeting your average daily flow. So if I come up with a design that says we're meeting our average day flow, all of a sudden we get 7 days of rain, we're not at our average daily flow any longer. We're way above, but yet we're not supposed to have any surface water discharge. So there's quite a bit of pieces and parts to this that nobody really has those answers yet, including the number one basis, which is to continue with a surface water discharge, you have to show a direct benefit to the environment. And we have several options for being able to show direct benefits by not doing anything. So while I don't think that's realistically going to fly, I'm going to wait till they tell us that doesn't fly and that we have to move a little farther into something else as one of our other opportunities. But I know we've already had our first day of engineering interviews today. and this is a hot topic on their minds as well. So they're working on them for other communities. So what I expect to do is over the next couple of weeks, over the next 6 months or so, DEP is supposed to provide a response back to us. We do not have to supply any supporting documentation. However, I'm getting the gist that most cities and municipalities are providing additional documentation because they know that when this hits the DEP's desk, they're going to have additional questions. And if at least if you provided them some of their documentation of what your plan is, I think they're going to be better approving what you're suggesting to them.
Thank you. And Dennis, when you're done with your stuff, I do have one thing for you before you leave, but you have one more segment, right?
Yes, sir. The fun topic of solid waste. Whenever you're all ready.
I think they're ready for it. Before you dive into it, Dennis, for the council members, you may have been the recipient of outreach from Waste Management over the past several days, based on a meeting that we had with them at the end of last week. We did hear from Greg Huntington, one of their representatives, that he was in the process of trying to communicate with as many of you as he possibly could. So if you were reached out to by him, fantastic. And if not, then this will bring you a little bit up to speed on some of our conversations with them. All yours, Dennis.
All right. So, of course, this memo was written prior to that meeting, so I didn't have a lot of information to be able to provide you from the meeting that occurred after the briefing memo had to go out. We'd had originally asked approximately 4 weeks before at a meeting from Waste Management to provide us with some suggested items or some bullet points to be able to bring to you as supported MOUs or a memorandum of understanding to allow them to function outside of their contract agreement for a specific amount of time. The thought is knowing that they were talking about suspending recycling or suspending yard waste pickup or some of the other things that we're seeing going on in the community surrounding us. We expected that they might have a list of bullets for you to consider. As of our meeting last Thursday afternoon, Waste Management believes that they are currently on the uptick with their hiring process. The other waste providers in the area have managed to get up and operating, so they're not stealing each other's drivers back and forth between all the different companies right now. So Waste Management feels fairly confident that they had a full seating of drivers and several more in training to be able to cover for those losses. Their equipment seems to have been improved, so we seem to be actually seeing a slightly better pickup schedule and at least not as many breakdowns. I say that as of today, they had to send a truck off early and none of the recycling got picked up with the small pup truck that uses that does alleyways. So they're still experiencing some issues and concerns, but from their meeting with them last week, their first suggestion to the city was not to alter anything at all with their contract. They were not supportive of eliminating recycling on the beaches. They were not supportive of altering the solid waste schedule or the recycling schedule or the yard waste schedules or the bulk pickup schedules. They believe that they're seeing improvement over the last 2 to 3 weeks and that they hope to get back to what we believe is our required contract level at some point in time pretty quick in the future. So that was their first choice. Their second choice was the opportunity to be able to eliminate recycling on the beaches. Upon that suggestion, which they do not support and neither does Public Works, it really only gains them one driver for the beaches, and that's it. And by gaining one driver for the beaches, it's not an overall help in the level of service and the quality of service that we'll be receiving. It's not a large enough impact to warrant the outcry that we're going to have or the additional need for people to do something different with their recycling during this downtime period. As well as just the fact that for those people that just choose to throw it into the regular solid waste, we're going to have a natural uptick in the amount of solid waste to be collected. So therefore, we're kind of shifting it from one hand to the other hand, but it still hasn't gone away. Their third option, if I remember right, I don't have my pad in front of me, was to look at keeping recycling intact, however, to reduce the number of solid waste collections to only once per week. Their feeling on that was that would only gain them 2 driver days. So that's 1 driver each day for 2 days, would gain them across the board. So again, logistically, it doesn't save them enough for being able to reduce it because you're just moving the waste to a different day. Nothing changes in volumes, and it really doesn't gain them any efficiency. So overall, at the end of the meeting, their suggestion to us was, we're getting better. They're being staffed up appropriately, and they hope to get our service levels back to what we expect. So the direction I have, basically, a lot of this direction is, where do we go from here as far as the request? To understand whether or not the council wants to continue to hold out. We are approximately 17 months away from this contract expiring in February of 23. Right now, we're seeing average garbage truck delivery times. If somebody wanted to start up a business and equip it, of at least 12 months on equipment. So the idea behind those questions, even though it's way out early, is if we're completely dissatisfied with waste management and we want to move on to another provider or the opportunity for another provider, the idea is to get that RFQ or RFP out immediately, or pretty quick, so that they would have enough time for any one of the other waste haulers to be able to equip up with drivers, trucks, and everything else to be ready for a February 23 start time. One of the other additional questions was whether Public Works should look at the opportunity of bringing solid waste back in-house and operating with our own solid waste division. That will require a significant amount of work internally, administratively, amongst me and several other people to be able to put together a plan to be able to do that. So the direction there was to assure that that's the way you wanted us to spend our time and dedicate our time to trying to really put forward that business case as to what it would take to be to take in-house, or at some level, whether or not that's a complete proposal or whether that's a 50% proposal, to try to do that, to have some ideas as to where do we go from here. And then one of the other alternatives is, do we just kind of hold out and wait and see if actually, this is on a turnaround at this point, and over the next 3 months, things improve and we get back to doing a normal operational business, and where waste management becomes the provider we were hoping we were going to get when we had the takeover from ADS from the previous contract. So several questions of direction, not knowing exactly which direction y'all would like me to proceed at this point. And then any other questions on any other opportunities or ideas you have as far as the suggestions of what to do next.
And with that presentation, we'll go over to Councilor Dumont first.
Thank you. All right, so I have a couple things to note. One, Waste Management isn't the only solid waste disposal company going through these issues. So even if we chose to look for somebody else, they're all facing those same issues. So I am happy to hear that they are on the uptick. Feeling like they're turning around. They have a lot of truck drivers getting ready, like they're in the training queue. So I think that that is good. However, taxpayers in Jack's Beach have been paying for a service that they have not been getting the full service for. And I was wondering, is the city looking at doing anything to try and make the people who have been paying the full amount for their solid waste fees every month less upset about the sad level of service that has been received?
I can take a stab at this one. Obviously, you're asking the Public Works Director a finance question, but I think I have been prepped enough that I can answer that question. So you are correct. With what they're paying on a monthly fee, they are receiving 4 services, or at least that's the idea behind it. The 4 services would include recycling collection on an average 4 times a month, garbage collection average of 8 times a month. I'm assuming 4 weeks in a month, obviously. Bulk pickup either as they put it out or upon their normal collection day, depending on what items they're putting out. And then as well as all of those things, yard waste pickup at a once a week pickup. So we get into the finance question of trying to determine how many times somebody gets missed, how often they get missed. Did they get missed every single week? Were they pulling their stuff back up to the house? So they really, while they were being missed because when they showed up the next day, the stuff wasn't out any longer. So it's trying to figure out where the city rides as far as do we consider an opportunity of a refund or of a credit or something along that lines. And so I think the reason Jacksonville has chosen not to is because it's so hard to determine what little fragment piece each particular item gets. So if you figure you're getting 8 solid waste pickups and then 8 recycling/yard waste pickups a month, that's 16. So 16 different collection times for an average homeowner that's paying about $16 a month. So do we say that because your yard waste was missed, you get a $1 credit? It gets financially to the point where it's very de minimis to be able to the paperwork is going to by far outweigh the cost. As far as doing any sort of a blanket refund, that would have to be direction from city council, and it would have to have some finance input to understand that would have an impact per our revenues that we would be taking. And then how do we determine what that affects? Is it only to residential customers only? Does this apply to commercial customers as well? We have not been seeing as many issues on the commercial side, but that's not to say we don't see issues on the commercial side or we haven't had issues on the commercial side. So somebody's got to be able to help us provide the direction as to what we're wanting to look at as far as a credit goes, and then what that cost is going to be, because that honestly would be outside of what was included in our adopted budget. Mike, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I just want to tack on to that with some conversations that I've had with the finance director, and that is with regards to the solid waste reserves, as well as the terms and conditions of the existing contract that we're under. Right now, over the past couple of years, we are in a position where the reserves are on a slight downslope, which means we're actually going through the reserves that we have stacked up over the last several years. You're probably all aware that the solid waste rate has not adjusted in a long time here at the city of Jackson Beach. But probably the biggest issue of all that I want you to be aware of is the fact that when we entered into this contract, going back multiple years ago before I got here, it was executed before I got here, the city was the beneficiary of lower labor rates for all of the CDL drivers that are currently out there, as well as lower recycling collection rates. Since the time of that contract execution, there has been a major shift in recycling to where we would not be, it would not be unreasonable for us to see the cost of recycling go up by a multiple factor of perhaps 2 to 3 times as much as we're currently paying for recycling when we go back out on the street for our next contract. So while council could decide from a policy perspective that you think it's a good idea that we give some type of a rebate back to the residents, the money that we have received or the money that we have not paid due to liquidated damages is staying in the solid waste reserves. And we will probably need every penny of those reserves when we go back out for our next contract. So I just wanted to kind of caveat that with some additional conversations Ashley and I have had.
Okay, thank you. I think this is something that we might want to just like for the residents 1 month, because pretty much everybody got hit for a while, probably a month. There was like one really rough month that they had a real hard go of it. But I think that's something that we might want to think about. None of us like to pay for a service that we don't get. So that's a discussion that we could have at a future briefing. Also, I want to follow up with the question of other companies or in-house. And what we've seen in the solid waste space in solid disposal waste is a consolidation of companies. And so there were fewer actors who are in that field. And it's cost a lot for new actors to enter the field and then to compete with these larger actors. The whole purpose of government contracting, when we start looking at contracting out services that were once provided by government to private contractors, it's the logic of the markets. And so competition is going to increase services and decrease costs. However, when that competition is taken away, services go down and costs can go up. And for that reason, and just what we're seeing over time with fewer and fewer solid waste haulers, is I think we should do I wouldn't say a full blown out business plan, but a cost benefit analysis of what we'd be looking at to bring it in-house, either wholly or partially. In this way, that when people's trash gets missed, we're not saying, well, it's the contractor's fault. It's on us to make sure that we're making them whole.
Councilor Golding.
To Ms. Dumont's point, when I was at the Florida League of Cities annual conference back in August, I had the opportunity to talk to several solid waste providers, and I talked to them and I asked every single one of them what their situation was. And they all said that they were all having issues with staffing, that they were all struggling to pick up, based on the schedule that they were contracted for. They were all offering hiring bonuses and were having trouble hiring people. So I agree. I don't see that that changing providers at this point is going to really do anything for us, because all the others are having the same problem. I am encouraged to hear, because I did talk to Greg, and was encouraged to hear that he feels that things are improving. I just wanted to make the comment that based on what we've been seeing that's happening in Jacksonville with their suspension of recycling, I would not want to do that here in Jax Beach, because I don't want to go there. If anything, what I asked Greg about is, reducing the yard waste pickup. I hope that we're getting into a time frame where it will naturally decrease, because we're getting into winter and hopefully there would be less yard waste that would need to be picked up. So maybe that will certainly help with the situation. But I've talked to citizens, and I think that citizens, the ones that I've spoken with, would be fine with reducing the yard waste pickup, as long as they knew when it was supposed to be picked up. If they knew that it's going to be picked up twice, like the second and fourth Thursday or whatever, and they can put their yard waste out with some confidence that it will be picked up, then they said that they could be fine with that. They don't necessarily need to have 4 days a week or 4 days a month, excuse me. And I did have a few citizens that said, hey, where I used to live, we never got garbage picked up twice a week. I'd be okay with once a week. But that one may be a harder one to really do at this point. I don't know. But those are just some of my thoughts based on conversations that I've had with citizens. And if reducing the yard waste pickup would help at all, maybe that's something that we need to look at.
Councilor Jansen.
Yeah, so I'm with Sandy in that regard. And I did have the opportunity to talk to Mr. Huntington, and I told him I'm not a big fan of eliminating the recycling, because that's just going to create a big problem for us. It's just going to create more solid waste and have a bigger impact on us. If anything, we could if we're going to make collection points, let's make collection points for yard waste, worst case scenario. But I'm not a fan of that. But I was promised, or I felt promised, that things are getting better. As far as bringing it in-house, I think the challenges don't change, whether it's a private company or we bring it in-house. You still got to find drivers, you still got to find trucks, you still got to find everything. So that doesn't eliminate our problem. In fact, I think it creates more of a burden for Mr. Barron than he's already got as far as his plate being full. Let's give them a chance. Let's see what they can do. If it gets down to the nuts and bolts of it, then we take a look at the yard waste and reduce the amount of times it's being picked up, or collection sites, or, employ a truck of our own to get the bigger, larger amounts of yard waste that are roadside. That's just my thoughts.
Councilor Dumont.
Thank you. When I said look at taking it in-house, I'm not talking about the missed pickup issue. It's the possibility in the future of increased cost for increased cost for decrease of services. And that is the whole reason why you contract it out. And if we don't have enough competitors out in the market, the market won't work. And so that's when government might want to look at bringing it in. I'm not asking you to do a whole business plan, but just not just a back of the envelope analysis, but something a little bit between that and a business plan.
Hoffman.
Thank you. I am also optimistic that hopefully things have turned around and we're on the upswing. And I did speak with Greg as well, and he seemed confident of that. I want to know, one, is there a regular follow-up plan for that meeting that you had with him and Dennis and the leadership over there? Is there like a monthly conference call being scheduled or some sort of regular touch point? And then the other question I had, and I think this is what you said, I just want to make sure I was hearing correctly. The chargeback, the penalties that we're charging them are going into the solid waste reserves. And you kind of equated that to the potential increase in cost in the future. So am I drawing a line from those reserves could be used at some future point to mitigate an increase in the fee to the customer?
Go ahead, Dennis.
So yes, we have looked at that, and I know in talking with Ashley on the reserves, those could become key to the opportunity, obviously, to mitigate those future costs. I know, looking overall at what we pay for solid waste, and from what I understand, I don't want to speak for finance, but from what I understand, at some point in time in the future, because of the cost of service and the cost of the CPI and the fuel adjustment they get, at some point in time in the future, we're going to get to the place where the amounts in that reserve fund are hitting the critical levels where we don't want to go. Now, keep in mind, we do keep a certain piece in that reserve fund to cover the immediate expense for hurricane preparedness, obviously, for disposal of items based on an extreme tropical storm. And so we want to be careful when we speak of those reserves. Those reserves are there to be able to have the capital funding available to be able to hire contractors to be able to come in and remove that waste, be able to pay their bill, and then wait upon reimbursement depending on storm issues. So as we decrease the cost of our requirement, how much we have in reserves, we've got to always make sure that we have at least a minimum amount into that reserve fund. So yes, well, at some point in time, we're going to be really looking hard at solid waste. To ease your minds, I came from a city that we did internal solid waste, and that's kind of why my suggestion was to look at a business case, simply because I also know I felt very helpless over the last year because the complaints keep coming. You all are getting them. I'm getting them as well. And the only way I can control quality is do it myself, where I can control what drivers I have, and I can control what personnel, and I can control what's going on. However, I also feel the pain on that piece of it, knowing that to do this particular analysis, we're going to have to be paying drivers what the market's going to be affording. And at this point in time, CDL drivers are getting $26 an hour minimum to go to any of these other firms, which means to keep from falling into the equation of I'm hiring them, training them, and they're going down the road to somebody else. That's got to be the starting point. And then we've got to be able to come up with enough things to keep them here, including our benefits package and or pension or whatever other items. So that does create some issues on the back end. I have began the back of the envelope business case as Mike's given me the direction to start. He told me not to get too deep in it and don't spend too much of my time in it until we got to the point of council direction that kind of wanted me to put something together that would be a comparison to whatever bids we may receive back from an RFP process. Obviously, if we're going to go out to RFP and costs are going to be $30 per customer, I'm sure you want to know if I can do it for $30 per customer as well. And so I think that was kind of the idea behind the questioning as to how early do you want us to begin this process? Do you want us to hold on until the first of the year to where we're looking at getting real close to that year, 13-month deadline to be able to do it? I do know we've had a couple of new waste vendors have entered the market here locally. And at this point in time, I know they're one of the two largest. We had two providers up north, and one of those was also purchased from one of the providers that we've just seen enter the market here. So I can also tell you that one of the local providers here is making a takeover of large solid waste areas up in the Midwest. So their footprint is expanding. So you're gonna expect that they'll be poised and ready to be able to be a competitive bidder if needed.
And I do think that looking at that, bringing it in-house, at least the rough numbers in context of the numbers that we see with the RFP is a really good idea. And then my other question just about, do we have a regular follow-up with that leadership group to continue to stay in touch with waste management? Or is it just me on it as needed?
We were meeting monthly prior to everything going to heck. They've had some turnover in some of the supervisory level people we were meeting with. So that meeting has kind of been intermittent a little bit. We did meet with some of their more middle level management a month ago, and then we haven't had another meeting with them, although we're still in daily contact with the route driver and as well as their supervisor and commercial route supervisor. So we are having local immediate connections, but the monthly meeting we were having, like I said, has kind of been sporadic, and we're waiting on them to be engaged and ready. We're willing to meet with them anytime they want to meet with us. It's just a matter of we've been providing the follow-up because obviously upon their monthly invoicing, we're doing our due diligence on the back end of it with the liquidated damages. So they are getting that information. But no, I by all means support a monthly meeting continuing on or more frequently if we need it. And I know we've been asking for that, for some form of an update for a significant amount of time. I have also been meeting with the Director of Public Works from Atlantic Beach to find out how their stuff's going because they switched contracts right in the middle of all this. So I have had a meeting just to try to get the feel for how their new contractor's going since Waste Management exited, and they have a new provider as well. So it's not just the local, Jack's Beach. I've really been reaching out to Atlantic Beach, Clay County, and then being monitored as well what's going on in Jacksonville. By far, we've been doing better than most, but not to what our residents are paying for.
Yeah, I think we need to just keep being the squeaky wheel, especially as long as we're still having problems. And Dennis, I just want to say, and I'll be done with my comments after this, please tell Ann and Frank and Dave and everybody in the Public Works team who's been handling this, how much we appreciate their diligence, because I mean, this probably came out of left field for them in terms of their job responsibilities. So we really appreciate them fielding the feedback from the residents.
You are exactly right. Ann and Janadia and Frank and Dave and Pat and Jason have all been very involved in this from the beginning. Some of them behind the scenes, putting in all the extra effort with the phone calls, the emails, and everything else. That's kind of where we felt a little bit helpless. We've wanted to jump in and help, but there's no provision in our contract for allowing us to help and be able to charge back any of the workforce. So some of the ideas that y'all are posing, we're going to want to put some of that information in the next RFP to assign that, so that we have the ability that if we get into this predicament again, we could jump in and help. It doesn't make sense for us to pay a vendor to do something and then us jump in and do it for them while we're still continuing to pay them, which is kind of some of our frustration as well. We've wanted to jump in and help. we've helped to the ability of their requests, but we've kind of had our hands tied in what we've really been able to do.
Councilor Goldman.
I would say I agree with you doing a preliminary analysis so that we have some idea when we do send out the RFP, what it would cost for us to do it in-house versus to compare. Because if we are, I did meet with Ashley Gossett several weeks ago to talk about the question that Ms. Dumont had about refunds to the customer. And she explained exactly like you did, Dennis, about the potential that we're going to see increases in the future, and that reserve could be used to help mitigate those, the pain to our customers. So we kind of don't want to touch the reserve if we can help it. But I think I think we need to have a comparison on on what it would cost us to do it in-house. I'm not sure that I would want to do that. It makes me feel good to know that you've got experience with that. But again, I think it's opening up a big can of worms, I think. But the other thing I was going to mention is there any possibility when we're going out for RFP that we could do something like combine forces, like with Atlantic Beach and Neptune Beach and Jacksonville Beach, so that we all, or the new contractors would be getting service, would be getting business from all of us. So then from that standpoint of what Ms. Dumont was talking about, now maybe we have a little more leverage or whatever, because now it's a bigger opportunity for them. Is that something that we could do? We could kind of like join forces?
We could. The issue that we have there is all three beach communities have separate and different intergovernmental agreements with Duval County. And so the agreement we have doesn't leave us paying tipping fees at the landfill. However, the other two communities do. So no matter what, even if we were to combine up, our stuff has to be kept separate because we don't pay at the landfill by weight for what we dispose of. So a truck to leave our beach and go to Neptune and go to Atlantic, now you would have a commingled truck. How would we pay for that truck, or would that truck be free? And so there's a lot of roadblocks that could be done with that. I know Mike and I have had some conversation. It would be very cumbersome to try to figure out, because you would have to keep Jacksonville Beach separate from the other two beach communities. And I believe Atlantic Beach, their new contract, I believe, was a 3-year contract, if I remember right. Oh wait, I'm being told it's a 7-year contract. So obviously that comes with some provisions on what they would be able to do as far as getting out of that. And I know Mike and I had some conversations, and we looked at the opportunity of whether or not this could be a separate governmental agency that would basically be in charge of beaches garbage. But like I said, again, that's completely spinning out another whole governmental agency to try to be able to do nothing but collect garbage for the beaches. So I'm hearing some good things from the community as far as the solid waste community. I believe in November, I'm going to be having a roundtable meeting with a lot of the other directors from our 5-county area on the topic of solid waste, because this is such a huge issue for everybody to kind of hear. The one good thing I can hear from is like I said, our providers not wanting to suspend recycling, which has already been done in Clay County and Duval County, and it's being talked about at St. Johns County. So we're kind of excluded from that conversation, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because I think that comes with a lot of political influence. And I'll be honest with you, it's what they did when I left up north for a whole entire year to combat some of the COVID costs. Was they suspended recycling for a whole year to be able to combat the increased costs, and community outroar for the loss of recycling. Keep in mind, every one of us has been ingrained since we were in kindergarten to recycle. It lets us feel like we're doing our part, you know, to help protect the environment. And people are willing to do it no matter what the cost, even if it's more expensive than disposing of it in the garbage. So got to be mindful of that as well.
Yeah, I definitely I don't want to see us suspend recycling at all. But the only other thing I wanted to mention is that I have talked to some residents of Neptune Beach, and just wanted to share that the comments that I got from the citizens in Neptune Beach is that they feel that they have been getting white glove service from their contractor. They have not had any issues or, you know, any problems. So whoever they're using, they're not having any issues with them.
And I can say that that may not be the same answer I got from Stefan Wynn about 6 months ago with regards to their service in Neptune. So it might be certain areas of the city are getting the white glove service. But I know that their council actually had a meeting, I believe 6 or 8 months ago, to talk about alternatives to the poor performance of solid waste they were receiving. Same situation as us, under contract and not really an opportunity to go to another firm. Councilor Meza?
Yes, question for Dennis. Dennis, are you able to provide data as to how many emails, calls you or Public Works have received since everything started happening? Like, have we had a decrease and an increase, and do we go down? Or I'm just curious to see what the data will show.
I don't think we actually, you know, like I said, we don't count calls, although the ladies do log them into their individual notebooks so that they can cross through when it's been taken care of and been done. It would require a fairly significant amount of work to count those, and then in combination with the emails, which we do have in the email box. I know we have seen a significant amount. It seemed like it leveled off, and it looked like it was actually going down, and we thought things were getting significantly better. And then we all of a sudden got a flurry of phone calls of people saying, you know, my yard waste hasn't been picked up for 7 weeks. And it's like, well, why haven't you called us 7 weeks earlier and let us know what's going on? So it's some of that happened. And then we had a flurry of a whole bunch of people calling with concerns that it had been weeks and months since they'd had any yard waste pickups at all. So it's kind of hard to judge what exactly we've got going on, other than the tracking we're doing through the liquidated damages and through the complaint driven process that we've got in place. And, you know, so the contract allows, it allows them to miss garbage. And then if we notify them that it was a miss, they have a certain amount of time to then collect it before it becomes a liquidated damage. So that's why we were trying to encourage people to email us and let us know when they were skipped right away, because we could begin the documentation trail. But when they call us back and say it's been missed for 6 or 7 weeks, it's very hard to backdate that time and try to be able to justify that we know it's been missed that long. And then how do we go back and be able to try to do anything with the liquidated damage based on it? It just kind of begins on the day of the call. So we don't have a great process in place to be able to count the number of phone calls, as well as we get some repeat customers that call quite frequently as well. So it's trying to judge which ones you're getting. Are we having an issue in a particular area? While this was going on, we were also hearing from some citizens that said, hey, I don't know what other people are dealing with, but we're not having any issues at all. So that was the good things we were hearing too, is we're sorry you're dealing with it, but we're not having it in my neighborhood for whatever reason. So I think sometimes it was just neighborhood driven, sometimes it was street driven, sometimes it was confusion. And I think there's a lot of issues with the processes as waste management was getting underway. They were taking our ticket loading system and creating their own tickets to actually send out to the drivers, because the system we're using to enter these is not the system that goes to the drivers. So there was some confusion with that when a driver was seeing 500, Fifth Street South was missed. Well, that was the 500 block, and it was the entire block, but what the driver got was 500. So they pulled up to 500, emptied it and left, and didn't collect the rest of the street because that's what they had as a miss. So we had some confusion that we had to work through on that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Dennis?
Hey, Dennis, the only thing I had for you is that there's a pretty substantial drop-off issue at the sidewalk on the utility strip between the sidewalk and the curb in front of Mango's. It looks like it's that whole area has got about a 5 to 6 inch drop-off. So I don't know if you've got somebody that can take a look at that, I appreciate it. I saw somebody fall out there the other day.
I will have somebody check that out tomorrow, and we'll see what we need to address there and get that safed up so that we don't
Thank
have.
you, sir.
Yes. I guess my only question as far as direction, to understand, should we just remain in a holding pattern for the next 3 months and then look at potentially something going out in January or February for an RFP to be effective a year later? Or should we just kind of keep riding out what we've got and wait to see if it improves enough to be willing to have a conversation about a contract extension?
Well, I've got 3 more hands raised.
Okay, go ahead.
Those 3 hands first. Councilor Stokes, followed by Jansen.
Well, Dennis, I was just going to kind of answer your question, is that I think we should circle back early part of January and see where things are. I'm very hopeful that staffing improves. I know my workforce has been incredibly depleted. I know everyone has seen the email because he replied back to everyone based on what I sent, that Coca-Cola has been sending me my business stuff in by UPS because they can't find CDL drivers. And that's, the world's largest Coca-Cola company. I'm very optimistic that whole situation will improve. And so I think maybe January, we could have another conversation and see where waste management is. And my only thing that I would hope for, and I think it sounds like we all got the chance to talk with Greg from Waste Management, but I just asked them to increase the communication with you and Mike, and hopefully with us as well, because we're all getting the email, the call, the text, and the most up-to-date info that we can give the citizen, the better. And that also helps reduce the amount of questions. Any info that we can put on Facebook, on our website, all of those places help the citizen, while they may not completely understand the issue, they'll at least be informed of the issue. So I would hope that we could review again in January, and hopefully we'll have much better results by that time.
Councilor Jansen.
Yeah, I'm all for a 3-month holding pattern and revisiting it real quick. One other thing before you jump off, Dennis, I just got one question off topic, but we'll finish up this first and then I'll ask you that.
Councilor Meza.
Yeah, I agree. We should put this on a holding pattern, come back to it, and see what happens. And I'm hoping. When I talked to Greg, he sounded very optimistic. I would say that I'm 70% optimistic. The other 30%, I'm still very skeptical. Just like myself, we're facing a very hard time finding individuals to work. And if they do, they quit right away. They go somewhere else. And it's not just, I think it's every industry. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we would get less emails about missed pickup trash. And one last thing, in the next 3 months, if things continue to stay the same or worse, have you thought what you want for us to do there, Dennis? Like if
Well,
we
and I
continue.
think that's why we had the last meeting with Waste Management, was to ask them what ideas they wanted to do. That's kind of where we really felt like our hands were tied, is, you know, that we have a contract that tells them what exactly they're supposed to do, but it doesn't allow us to do a whole lot. So while I could go back and tell them, okay, fine, we'll collect yard waste, you know, they're still expecting to be paid for it unless we have some sort of an agreement. So I think Mike and I, especially with the holding pattern scenario, we did want to kind of get and see if there was a consensus for if this became a more of an emergency scenario where we had the ability to be able to work with Waste Management to try to come up with some sort of an agreement as to how to move forward for a short-term time frame without trying to reassemble the whole entire group. Meaning, as such, is if they called and said, hey, we're still struggling with drivers, we've just lost a whole bunch more, we need to do X, Y, Z, whether that was a reduction in service or reduction in service days or something along that lines, whether Mike and I had the ability to be able to work together and include the mayor if we needed to be able to come to an agreement of how to put together an MOU, a short duration alteration to the contract to allow them to get over any other hiccups, or whether we needed to try to put that together as an emergency meeting to get permission to move ahead. I will throw as a caveat, we did have an unrelated meeting with our debris hauler based on just, they do that every time hurricane season comes around. And they informed us that they were actually collecting garbage in the city of Dallas, Texas. Simply, they did not have enough waste providers to do it, and they reached out to the debris company to come in and take over garbage collection for the city. You know, that obviously is kind of showing you that this is not just a Northeast Florida even issue. This is a significant issue for the nation as well. So just something to kind of keep in mind, or at least get some thoughts on, so that we knew in a situation where they were asking us to make some changes, whether we had the ability to be able to do that or how you wanted us to proceed with it.
Another thing too, I didn't get a chance to ask this question to Greg, but do you know if, so the supervisors, the route supervisors, are they out on the route picking up trash too, or are they sitting behind a desk? Because the delivery drivers that I get to the restaurant, the bar, sometimes they'll have people call out. The supervisor who sits behind the desk ends up driving a truck and delivering the goods. Now, are they doing the same? Do they talk about, hey, bringing in the people that put in their time that are sitting behind a desk to come out, or is it something that, I mean, obviously, you know, it's beyond our control, but do you know if they do any of that?
Waste management doesn't seem to be formulated in as such that the supervisors are actually collectors or drivers. I'm not saying they're sitting behind a desk either. I know we are struggling to get them through their waste management processes and some of the things that they do different. Waste management is known to be a lot more safety oriented than a lot of other contractors that are out there. So they have significant influence on equipment, maintenance, and drivers and driver safety as well. You know, what we're getting back is we get feedback back from those supervisors that they're actually, if they're drivers or if they have them, but they don't really have the ability for those folks to be able to operate trucks. That's not what they're hired to do. That's not what their forte is. I don't even know that they're holding CDLs themselves. And I did hear it for a while there. We had plenty of yard guys, is what they were calling them. Basically, the guys that are riding on the backs of the truck that are loading stuff. They had plenty of those, but they were missing the actual truck drivers themselves. Is what they were struggling with, was the CDL holders. And I know they all had to start significantly adding bonuses, as well as increasing what they were paying for wages to be able to keep seats filled during this last 6 to 9 months time frame.
All right, Dennis. Well, thank you very much for putting this together. And Joe, I know Frank has been getting a lot of calls from the businesses here downtown, but no, thank you very much. And I know you guys do a great job. So thank you very much.
So let me ask you the 4 questions, paraphrased a little differently for council direction, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So over the next 90 days, if for some reason things with waste management went sideways, would council be amenable to a short-term modification to the contract in order to alleviate the impact to our residents and make the service a little more amenable? I'm seeing heads nod. Okay, that's good. Second one, I think I know the answer to this. Should Public Works consider negotiating a contract extension for the current waste management contract? Seeing one head shake no, another no, and a lot of, I think there's some consternation with a direct negotiation at this point in time. Should Public Works start putting together an RFP, but not put it out yet until after the first of the year and we've had a revisit with council? I see heads nodding yes on that. And do we want to have perhaps a little bit more of a business case swag as to what it would be to bring the service in-house and basically transfer it from the back of the envelope to an actual piece of paper? I'm seeing heads nod on that as well. Dennis, you got good direction on that? He does. And okay, so while that takes care of all the topics that were on the agenda, Councilor Jansen, I think you said you had one more question for Dennis before he logged off.
Yeah, since it's running late tonight, just super Reader's Digest version. The switch from the chlorine gas to liquid chlorine and that project for the water. Do you know where we're at in that, the status of that?
Yeah, currently it's just listed in our CIP as funded for this year as a design project. So because of the direction at the last council meeting to expand our engineering firms from 9 to 20, we're currently doing those 1-hour interviews / presentations this week and next week. And then we're going to round back up with our internal group to start talking about who on that list of 20 we feel would be best to tackle that project as an engineering design process. So unfortunately, we're kind of stuck in between that area where our contracts expired September 30th with engineering firms, and we don't have existing contracts in place yet. We are very close. I have half a dozen, I think, partially executed. I'm kind of waiting to get a few more before I bring them downtown to go through the signing process to get everything in the books as well as all these presentations going on. So I think our plan is, like I said, to meet this week and next week, and then have an internal meeting the following week to start rounding up projects and where we think they should land based on our current new slate of engineering firms. And then that's probably, I'm going to guess around a 6-month guess as far as being able to get a design, maybe 6 to 8 months to get a design. And then I think depending on the direction we receive on ARPA funding as to whether that project will actually go to construction in FY22 or whether we'll actually hold it as it's in the CIP for construction for FY23. It's budgeted for next year. However, I believe you're going to be having a briefing topic to discuss whether or not that's going to move forward in a little faster track simply because of the funding source that's available.
Thank you so much. You're doing a great job.
Thank you, sir.
And Dr. Dumont, before I call on you, I was going to go back to letters F and G on the agenda to see if anybody wanted to talk about committee assignment reports. I'm not seeing.
I'll be brief, Mike, because I said I would do it a couple weeks ago. Just on the Jacksonville transformation, no update. We were supposed to have something end of September. I'm guessing it's delayed because of COVID. But I will, I know Mike and Chris were at this meeting. I've made a lot of notes in here. I'm going to see if I can try to get a fresh copy to distribute to everybody. and I will do that through Mike, but just wanted to let everybody know that it's still going on. We weren't thrown out. And they really like the beaches as one of the areas for the Blue Zone. So I tried to keep that as brief as possible.
Thank you, Chet. Councilor Golding and Dumont, or Councilor Dumont, your hands raised. Councilor Golding, yours. Either of you have report outs for committee assignments? Before we jump into other topics, Councilor Golding, I see you nodding your head yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the email that I sent out, the compilation of the notes from the workshops. And just for anybody who hasn't had a chance to look at them yet, definitely look at the workshop about the future of transportation, because I found it really interesting that there are these beep autonomous shuttles that are being used in Jacksonville, not sure exactly where, but also at Mayo Clinic. And so might be something for us to consider at some point down the road, a transportation option for the downtown area to move people around in the downtown. So anyway, if you get a chance, look at that. But hopefully the other workshop that I found to be really, really interesting was the first notes in my memo about social media and connecting with the public, because that was one workshop I wasn't able to go to at the conference whenever it was we went prior. And there was a lot of really good information in there, especially with social media and how we use social media as elected officials and what we should and shouldn't be doing. So, and that's not something that we often get a lot of information about. So I would encourage you guys to look at that as well.
Thank you. And we'll bump over to Councilor Dumont.
This is for the future topics, possible future briefing topics. We're sliding into that one. I have two. Given that we've received some emails on an appointed and an elected official possibly breaking the ethics policy, I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, but what I'm saying is I think we all, even though, and I guess it's just, there's four of us who were here when the council came up with the ethics policy. And yes, everybody signs off on it or is supposed to read it. But I think a training by our new city attorney, Ms. Robinson, would be very helpful for elected and appointed officials on all the boards to just review that ethics policy to make sure that we're all starting from a fresh start and we understand what all of it is entailing. So I would like one to have a training on the ethics policy for elected and appointed officials. So this way we're all on the same page as to what's allowable and what's not. Mike, did you want to see nods on that or thumbs downs or?
I'm seeing some heads nod and thumbs up, so I think we're good on that.
Okay.
When we bring new council members on, I mean, they get a training, right? As part of their,
They get an onboarding, and as part of the onboarding, they're giving in the code of ethics policy. But we don't.
I think board members should get it.
Yeah, but we don't go through every section in detail to talk about what it really means and how it's interpreted. We have, I think, when we did the onboarding with councilors Jansen, Meza, and Stokes, we had a total of about 2 hours or so with each individual. And in that 2 hours, we tried to cover everything from sunshine law, public records, handing out the code of ethics, basically going through a myriad of operational issues with the city as well. So I think there would be some benefit in spending some dedicated time specifically talking about the code of ethics. And if we do it right, we could actually record it and use it as a training session for future council members and future board appointees, and don't necessarily have to do it every time.
And my second one is, since I am getting a very tepid, if not cold feeling from other council members on a moratorium or a pause on multi-unit housing, are we at least amenable in a briefing to discuss opening up the LDC with regard to parking and multi-units? So townhouses and these multiplexes, and duplexes would have to have more than the 2 dedicated spots. This is, so it's not putting the moratorium, but it is being more proactive than just waiting until the situation's gone too far.
I'm seeing 3 yeses, 1 no, and some others no feedback.
It's just a briefing topic.
Yeah, I think Heather and I will put our heads together and throw something on for a future briefing for you to look at. But basically, I think what Dr. Dumont's referring to is taking a look specifically at the LDC element that right now allows for a minimum of 2 parking spaces for any townhouse, regardless of the size of the townhouse. So if you have a 4-bedroom townhouse, you can still put in a 1-car garage and 1 driveway parking space. Would council want to have a briefing to talk about whether or not that LDC element should be amended in order to perhaps be a sliding scale? The more bedrooms you build, the more parking spaces you have to provide.
I don't have a problem putting on a briefing.
Yeah, Mike, would you make sure and include our new city attorney in that? Because when we were at the emo training, I had a brief conversation with the attorney that was present and how to avoid litigation, and brought up this topic because that was the biggest concern out of all of us and not wanting to move forward. And he did mention that that would be a right point for litigation, that being that it's targeted. If you would, now that we have a city attorney, include her. So thank you.
You got it. Dr. Dumont, did you have anything else? Councilor Golding.
Yeah, the last briefing, I had brought up the idea of joining the American Flood Coalition, and I believe the information was sent out to everybody. And I'd like to suggest again that we have this as a briefing topic, and if it's only 5 minutes or so, we could have somebody from the American Flood Coalition be on the briefing to answer any questions that we may have, so that we could at least consider it.
Looking for a consensus. I see some heads nodding. Okay, we will schedule that as well. Is there anything else council wants to go over this evening before we end tonight's briefing? Going once, going twice. With that, thank you all for your time this evening. Our next meeting will be next Monday at 6 o'clock in the council chambers. Thank you all and have a great night.
Night.